His hands traced the warmth of my skin as steam swirled around us, creating a cocoon of heat and desire. The sauna's wooden walls absorbed our whispered words, our shared breath, the quiet sounds of two strangers becoming something more. I pressed closer, feeling his steady rhythm, the way his fingers found every sensitive spot with practiced ease. "Don't stop," I breathed against his neck, my voice barely audible over the hiss of steam. His response was immediate, urgent, pulling me deeper into a moment I never expected to find in a place meant for relaxation. Hey, if you're already hooked by that opening, smash that like button and hit subscribe. You definitely don't want to miss where this goes. I hadn't planned on staying at the spa past my massage appointment, but something about the day felt different. Maybe it was the stress melting away from weeks of endless client meetings, or the way the Colorado mountain air seemed to clear my head for the first time in months. The receptionist had mentioned the sauna was particularly quiet this time of evening, and after my deep tissue session left me feeling like liquid warmth. The thought of more heat sounded perfect. The spa's evening atmosphere was intoxicating. Dim lighting, the soft sound of water features, and that particular scent of eucalyptus and cedar that made everything feel luxurious. I changed into my robe, grabbed a towel, and made my way toward the sauna area. The hallway was lined with smooth river stones, and each step felt like I was walking further away from my regular life and into something unknown. When I pushed open the heavy wooden door, steam immediately embraced me. The sauna was larger than I expected, with tiered benches along 3 walls and a central stone heater glowing with gentle heat. At first I thought I was alone, exactly what I'd hoped for. But as the steam shifted, I caught sight of a figure on the upper bench, partially obscured by the thick, warm air. He was leaning back against the wall, eyes closed, completely at ease. Even through the haze, I could see the definition in his shoulders, the way his chest rose and fell in slow, measured breaths. Dark hair, slightly damp from the heat, strong jawline, the kind of presence that commanded attention without trying. He looked like he belonged here, like he'd claimed this space as his own. I settled onto the lower bench across from him, arranging my towel and trying to look casual while my pulse quickened. The heat was intense, but not unbearable, the kind that made you aware of every inch of your skin, every breath, every subtle movement around you. For several minutes, we shared the silence, just the soft hiss of steam, the occasional creak of wood, and the growing awareness that we were very much not alone. I let my eyes drift closed, trying to focus on relaxation, but I could feel his presence like a magnetic pull. "First time here?" His voice cut through the quiet, low and smooth, with just enough roughness to make my stomach flutter. I opened my eyes to find him looking at me directly, no longer pretending to rest. His gaze was steady, confident, the kind that made it clear he was used to getting what he wanted. "At this spa, yes," I said, matching his casual tone. "You?" "I come through Denver fairly often for work," he said, shifting slightly on his bench. The movement made the towel around his waist shift just enough to reveal more of his torso. "This place has the best sauna in the city. Most people don't know about the evening hours. Lucky me, then." The words came out more flirtatious than I'd intended, but I didn't regret them. Something about the heat, the isolation, the way he was looking at me, it all felt charged with possibility. He smiled, slow and knowing. "Silas," he said, extending his hand across the space between us. "Layla." His palm was warm and slightly rough when I shook it, his grip lingering just long enough to send heat up my arm that had nothing to do with the sauna. "So what brings you to Denver, Layla?" The way he said my name made something tighten low in my stomach. "I live here," I said. "Marketing consultant. You?" "Construction management. Big project up in Vail." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, closing the distance between us. "Long days, lots of stress. This helps me unwind." The conversation felt normal on the surface, but underneath was a current of something else entirely. The way his eyes tracked the movement of my hand as I adjusted my towel. The way I found myself leaning forward too, drawn into his orbit. The growing tension that had nothing to do with our words and everything to do with the heat building between us. "You're not what I expected to find in here," he said after a moment, his voice dropping lower. "What did you expect?" "Definitely not someone so—" He paused, his gaze moving slowly over what he could see of me through the steam. Distracting. My breath caught. We were crossing a line, moving from casual conversation into something more deliberate, more dangerous. The smart thing would be to laugh it off, maybe excuse myself, maintain the boundaries that separated strangers. Instead, I tilted my head slightly. "Distracting how?" His smile turned predatory. "You know exactly how." The steam seemed to thicken around us, or maybe it was just harder to breathe. I was acutely aware of how little we were both wearing, how alone we were, how easy it would be to close the space between us. The heat was making me dizzy, but not in a bad way, in a way that made everything feel heightened, more intense. I should probably go, I said, but I made no move to leave. Should you? He stood up slowly, and I couldn't help but track the movement of his body, the way the towel hung low on his hips, the way his muscles moved under his skin. He took a step closer, then another, until he was standing right in front of me. The height difference with him standing and me sitting put him at eye level, close enough that I could see the water droplets on his chest, smell the clean scent of his skin mixed with the cedar of the sauna, close enough that all I had to do was lean forward slightly. Layla. My name on his lips was like a command and a question at the same time. I looked up at him, my heart pounding. Yeah? I think you want to stay. He was right. Despite every rational thought telling me this was crazy, that I didn't know him, that this wasn't me, I wanted to stay more than I'd wanted anything in a long time. Instead of answering with words, I reached out and touched his stomach, just my fingertips against his skin. He sucked in a breath, his muscles tensing under my touch. The contact sent electricity shooting through me, making me bold in a way I'd never been before. Is this okay? I whispered, my fingers spreading wider across his torso. His hand covered mine, pressing it more firmly against him. More than okay. That was all the encouragement I needed. I stood up slowly, our faces now inches apart, my hand still on his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing under my palm. The towel around my chest felt like too much, like a barrier I desperately wanted gone. He seemed to read my mind. His fingers found the edge of my towel where it was tucked just above my chest. Can I? I nodded, unable to speak. With careful, deliberate movements, he loosened the towel and let it fall to the bench behind me. The warm air hit my skin, but it was nothing compared to the heat in his eyes as he looked at me. Beautiful, he murmured, his hands hovering just above my skin, not quite touching but close enough that I could feel their warmth. I reached for his towel in response, my fingers trembling slightly as I freed the knot at his hip. The fabric pooled at his feet, and suddenly we were both completely exposed, steam swirling around us like a cocoon that hid us from the rest of the world. For a moment, we just looked at each other, taking in what we'd revealed. Then his hands finally made contact, skimming along my arms, my shoulders, my back, touch so light it made me shiver despite the heat. I pressed closer, eliminating the space between us, feeling his warmth against my entire body. His breath hitched when our skin met, and his arms wrapped around me, pulling me tighter against him. We shouldn't. I breathed against his neck, even as my body molded to his perfectly. Probably not, he agreed, his lips finding the sensitive spot just below my ear. But I'm not stopping unless you tell me to. I didn't tell him to stop. Instead, I tilted my head back to give him better access, my hands exploring the planes of his back, the strength in his shoulders. His mouth moved along my throat, each kiss sending waves of sensation through me. His hands roamed lower, tracing the curve of my waist, the flare of my hips, mapping my body like he was memorizing every inch. When his fingers found the sensitive skin at the small of my back, I gasped, pressing closer instinctively. You're so responsive, he murmured against my skin, his voice rough with desire. I love how you react to me. His words sent another rush of heat through me, different from the sauna's warmth. This came from inside, building and spreading until I felt like I might combust. I tangled my fingers in his hair, pulling his mouth back to mine for a kiss that was anything but gentle. He walked me backward until my legs hit the bench, then lifted me easily onto its edge. The wooden surface was warm against my skin, but nothing compared to the fire building inside me as he positioned himself between my knees. Are you sure about this? He asked, his hands resting on my thighs, giving me one last chance to change my mind. I answered by pulling him closer, my legs, wrapping around his waist, drawing him against me. The feeling of him pressed against my core made us both groan, the sound echoing softly in the steamy air. He moved slowly at first, letting us both adjust to the sensation, his forehead pressed against mine as we breathed together. The heat of the sauna intensified everything, every touch, every movement, every whispered sound between us. Feel so good, I whispered, my nails digging into his shoulders as he found a rhythm that made my toes curl. He responded by deepening his movements, his breath hot against my ear as he murmured things that made my pulse race even faster. The combination of his voice, his body, the forbidden nature of what we were doing, it was overwhelming in the best possible way. The steam continued to swirl around us, creating a private world where nothing existed except the two of us and the building tension between our bodies. I lost track of time, lost track of everything except the way he moved against me, the way his hands gripped my hips, the way my name sounded when he said it like a prayer. Close, I gasped, feeling the familiar tightening that meant I was approaching. The edge. Let go, he urged, his thumb finding the spot that made me arch against him. I want to feel you. That was all it took. The sensation crashed over me in waves, making me cry out softly as my body trembled against his. He followed moments later, his own release evident in the way his body tensed, the way his grip tightened on me, the soft groan that escaped his lips. We stayed connected for long moments afterward, both trying to catch our breath, skin damp with sweat and steam, hearts gradually slowing back to normal. The reality of what we'd just done began to seep in along with the cooling air. Wow, I finally managed, my voice shaky. He chuckled softly, pressing a gentle kiss to my shoulder. Yeah, wow. We separated slowly, reaching for our towels with the sudden awkwardness that sometimes follows intense intimacy between strangers. But as I wrapped the fabric around myself, I realized I didn't regret what had happened. If anything, I felt more alive than I had in months. I gestured toward the door, suddenly aware that we were still in a public space, even if it felt like our own private world. Right, he nodded, adjusting his own towel. Me too. But neither of us moved immediately. We stood there looking at each other in the steam-filled space, both seeming to realize that walking out of this sauna would mean returning to our separate lives, to being strangers again. Will I started, then stopped, not sure how to ask if I'd see him again without sounding needy. He stepped closer, his hand cupping my face gently. I'm in town for another week, he said quietly. Same time tomorrow? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He smiled, pressed one more soft kiss to my lips, then gathered his things and left me alone in the steamy sanctuary where everything had changed. I stayed for a few more minutes, trying to process what had just happened. I'd never done anything like that before. Never been so spontaneous, so reckless, so completely consumed by desire for someone I barely knew. It should have scared me. Instead, it made me feel powerful, alive, more myself than I'd felt in years. The next day crawled by with painful slowness. I couldn't concentrate on work, couldn't stop thinking about the heat of the sauna, the feeling of his hands on my skin, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered in the world. By evening, I was practically vibrating with anticipation. I arrived at the spa early, my heart racing as I made my way to the sauna. Would he be there? What if he'd changed his mind? What if it had just been a moment of madness that he'd already forgotten? But when I opened the heavy wooden door, he was waiting, same position as the night before, like he'd never left. When he saw me, his smile was warm and genuine, erasing all my doubts. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said as I settled onto my usual bench. I wasn't sure either, I admitted, but I couldn't stay away. This time, there was no pretense of casual conversation. The tension between us was immediate and undeniable. Within minutes, we were reaching for each other, our towels forgotten as we picked up where we'd left off the night before. If anything, it was even more intense than before. Now we knew each other's responses, knew what drove each other wild. He mapped my body with more confidence. I responded to his touch with less inhibition. We moved together like we'd been doing this for years instead of days. Afterward, as we lay tangled together on the wide upper bench, both breathing hard and covered in a sheen of sweat and steam, he traced lazy patterns on my skin. I don't usually do this, I said quietly. What, come to saunas? His tone was teasing, but I could hear the underlying question. This. Any of this. I'm usually much more careful. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers still moving against my skin. Me too. Actually, there's something about you, though. Something that makes me want to throw caution out the window. I turned in his arms to look at him. Is that good or bad? Honestly, I have no idea. But I don't want it to stop. Neither did I. For the rest of the week, we met every evening in our steam-filled sanctuary. Each encounter was different, sometimes urgent and desperate, sometimes slow and exploratory. We learned each other's bodies like students cramming for an exam, memorizing every response, every preference, every way to drive each other to the edge. We talked, too, in the quiet moments between passion. I learned he was from Seattle, that he'd been married once but it ended amicably, that he loved his work, but sometimes felt restless for something more. He learned that I'd moved to Denver after college and never left, that I'd been single for longer than I cared to admit, that I sometimes felt invisible in my day-to-day life. Not invisible, he murmured against my hair one evening. Definitely not invisible. On our last night together, knowing he was flying back to Seattle in the morning, everything felt more intense, more poignant. We moved together with a desperation that spoke to the temporary nature of what we'd found. When it was over, we held each other longer than usual, both reluctant to let go. What happens now? I asked, the question I'd been avoiding all week. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. "I don't know," he finally said. "I wish I did." We exchanged numbers, made promises to stay in touch, but we both knew it wasn't the same. What we'd found in this steamy cocoon couldn't be replicated in the real world of texts and phone calls and different time zones. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my apartment door. "Thank you for the most incredible week of my life. You're unforgettable. S." That was 3 months ago. We've texted a few times. Casual check-ins, nothing deep. He mentioned a possible project that might bring him back to Denver, but nothing concrete. I've gone back to the sauna a few times, but it's never the same. How could it be? Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, if it was just some fever dream brought on by too much heat and stress. But then I remember the way he looked at me, the way his hands felt on my skin, the way he made me feel like the most desirable woman in the world. That was real. That happened. I've tried dating since then, gone on apps, let friends set me up. But nothing compares to that week of stolen moments in the steam. No one has made me feel the way Silas did, completely present, utterly desired, boldly alive. Maybe that's the point. Maybe some connections are meant to be brief, intense, perfect in their temporariness. Maybe trying to make it into something more would have ruined the magic of what it was. Or maybe I'm just telling myself that because it's easier than admitting I might have let something incredible slip away. Either way, I'll never forget those 7 evenings in the sauna, where a stranger became something more and then disappeared back into the steam from which he emerged. It changed me, awakened something I didn't know was sleeping. And even if it never happens again, I'm grateful for the reminder that life still has the power to surprise us, even in the most unexpected places. So tell me, have you ever had a moment like that? Where you threw caution to the wind and did something completely out of character? Where would you draw the line between spontaneity and recklessness? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing about the moments that make us feel most alive. And if this story sparked something in you, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and turn on notifications so you never miss when things get steamy. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best adventures happen when we least expect them.